live webinar session on strategic partnerships. I'm Brian Benson. I'm the VP for Strategic Alliances at MedTech Innovator. For those joining on our live stream, MedTech Innovator is the largest accelerator of medical devices in the world. And really the kind of cornerstone of MedTech Innovator was built around strategic partnerships. When we started to think about supporting early stage companies, we realized there was a big gap in their understanding and knowledge from their local ecosystem. With limited input, instead of speaking or having the opportunity to engage with those people that would be their potential partners, the strategics, we decided to kind of frame and build MedTech Innovator around that, the ethos. And really, MedTech Innovator has, since over the past 10 years, built a pretty strong ecosystem of amazing partners. Some of those you'll meet today during this session, and really kind of enabling companies to get access to that insight. And today we're opening up our webinars to share also with our broader ecosystem beyond our main cohort. So before we get started, for those joining on the live stream, feel free to input your questions in the chat on the screen. And then for our cohort companies, you can always put that in the Zoom meeting communication, and we can kind of get you sorted there during the discussion, and we'll try to pose those additional questions during the hour chat. So with that, I would like to introduce our amazing partners and panelists today. First, we'll start off with Edna Lazar, who's the Senior Director of Exploration at Edwards Lifesciences. Edna?
Thank you, Brian. Very happy to be here. So my name is Edna Lazar. I am a Senior Director of Exploration at Edwards Lifesciences. I've been in my role for a little over 2 years. My background, long time ago, I was an attorney. Left that life away, and after my MBA, I basically joined J&J in marketing and enjoyed it very, very much. I call it my second school, and that was in the US, but I'm Israeli, and I returned to Israel back in 2009. And what Israel has to offer is really a lot of startups and a lot of innovation. And that's where I found my kind of like my passion is working in startups and in marketing roles. And later I expanded to BD. My first startup failed miserably. The second startup that I worked in succeeded, at least financially. And that's when, after those two experiences, I basically switched to the investment side. And I worked as the Chief Business Officer of an incubator, and now at Edwards Lifesciences.
Wow, that is the ideal journey from doing your own startups. So I'm probably going to ask you a little bit more about kind of the first one. I love to hear what happened there. I know it's not directly a part of the topic today, but I think it's so insightful for our companies to know the type of people that they would be meeting with, the type of people that they would be talking to that may understand their struggles and be an advocate for them. So it's always nice to find a champion for some of our companies. So thanks, Edna. We'll turn it over to Tanya. Tell us a little bit about your background and your role at J&J.
I gotta say, Edna's got the most awesome, colorful background. I'm boring. So I'm Tanya Danowski. I am Vice President of Business Development at Johnson & Johnson. I focus on medical devices my entire career. I'm coming up on 25 years. I am that old dog that stayed 25 years, but I started in a cardiovascular business that we don't own anymore doing BD. I moved into some commercial roles, came back to BD, my primary love and passion. I moved to our general surgery business. I moved to contact lenses, and now I'm in robotics and in digital solutions, all doing BD. So I guess what I offer maybe is a breadth of experiences within J&J and the J&J network, but I have been partnering with startups all these 25 years. And to Edna's point, the day I fell into BD, which I really did fall into it, I knew I'd found the thing I love to do. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I think Edna's going to bring so much more of a richer conversation with her insights on both sides of the fence, but I'm happy to share any potentially relevant learnings.
Well, I mean, Tanya, it seems like you're still learning some new tricks. And I know our companies love working with you. So, old hat, new hat, it doesn't matter. I think you're amazing at what you do. So So thanks for again being a part of our organization and supporting some of the companies through our program. So that was a little background on our great partners today, and I really kind of want to jump into the meat of the discussion. How do you look at external innovation in your roles? How does that work in your organization? And how do you look and identify opportunities and evaluate those as part of your role at Tanya? We'll start with you at J&J.
Well, there are a lot of questions in there, Brian. If I forget any, please let me know. So first and foremost, if anybody takes the time, and maybe you do it during your MBA, and looks at the history of J&J, whether it's pharma or even consumer or medical devices, the lifeblood of us is built on partnering, acquiring startups. I don't care where you start, except for maybe sutures. It all starts with something that we might have licensed or that we acquired, and then we built into a bigger platform, making billion-dollar platforms. So literally everything, just about everything. I'm trying to think about the one thing, Band-Aids, maybe not, I don't know. So it's just inherent in our and how we execute our strategy. But it does start with, what is the strategy? What's our strategy for the businesses? And then from there, what is it we can build internally, and where do we need to look externally for partnerships and or acquisitions? And so easily, I'd say close to 50% of what we do for products that are out there in the marketplace really do come from what we've done with outside parties.
Great. I'll drill into that in a little bit, but I'll give Edna the chance to chime in on kind of, again, how they look at and find innovation for their company, and how they evaluate or engage with startups.
Yeah, well, I think my title says it all. I'm part of an exploration group. So, we have the full kind of like, go ahead and try to explore and find. I think we all understand that there is so much out there that patients need. Internal R&D does not supply it all. We need to be able to find all the options on the outside, and it's the combination of the internal R&D and the external kind of like startup world that will bring kind of like the best solutions. And I don't think we shy away from kind of like, may the best product win, like may the best solution win. And that's a philosophy, and I kind of like, I feel very strong with that. I'm getting the support for that. How do we find the startups? I should have said I cover Israel and Europe. Israel is very easy. Everyone knows everyone. And it's a small geography. I know people then learn to know me, and word gets around. In Europe, it's a bit different. For me, I'm not from Europe, and I joined during COVID, so there were no conferences, I couldn't meet people. It's finding those kind of like big sources of innovation that will lead us to kind of like where the startups are. So I think exploration is a perfect title, because we do venture into paths that are new to us.
But Edna, I would bet, because you're part of a big company too, that when a startup has their vision or their prototypes, they've got their shopping list of who they want to contact. So no matter whether you found them or not, the moment they reach out to somebody at Edwards, I'm pretty darn sure it finds its way to you over a matter of time. It might be a week or two, or it might be a matter of hours. I've had both experiences, but almost always, because I think we're on every shopping list too, it finds its way to me. Despite being a remarkably huge organization, it is fascinating how fast things make their way. Like, probably because somebody doesn't want to deal with it on their plate, and they know it's not for them, so they make sure they get it. Make sure they find the way to pass it on. So I think that's for me, it's a key message for our attendees. Maybe we say no, but I promise you, it ends up on our desk for us to consider.
Yeah, that's very.
Well, I mean, that's actually, you guys are jumping ahead, and I love it.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
No, this is perfect, because it's a great trajectory for the discussion. Is really, how do they engage with you? Because I know there's some, some of our companies have mentioned going to the CEO and emailing the CEO, or who is email, and who is not going to get you anywhere email, and how do they interact or best interact with you when starting to explore these types of partnerships?
I think I answered the first question, right? Yeah. No. So I'll take the first one. I'll pass the second part to Edna and see what she says. If you send an email to Alex Gorski, I have a funny story. I'll tell you a funny story in a minute. But if you send it to Joaquin, our new CEO, I promise you it's going to make its way to me in a matter of very, very quickly, like in a matter of probably a day. But I actually had about 5 or 6 years ago, somebody had been in consulting and through their consulting work had worked with J&J. And so as a result, they had a really big Rolodex of everybody J&J. So now they're in a new role, and I think they actually started a business or something, along with their buddies. And so their buddies, literally, and this guy, emailed everybody they knew in J&J. Now, this wasn't like 2 or 3 people. They like literally wallpapered the email universe at J&J by easily 50 people. And it wasn't just the US. It was global. I mean, it was Europe, it was US and Australia. And I spent the day, so please don't do this to me. I spent the day responding to all these emails to J&J constituents saying, yeah, I got it. It's already made its way to my desk. I've got it. I'm talking to them. And then I had to email the guys and go, stop. Like literally full stop. Because right now I don't want to talk to you. I have been bombarded. I have literally, it was like I was hacked or something. So anyway, my point is, be kind to us on the receiving end, because it will find its way to the right person. It may take, vacations notwithstanding, it will make its way to the right person to engage with you. That's my J&J experience, and I'm telling you that is the absolute truth. So you get part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I can only say that I've received, like Mike Musalem, our CEO, has sent us down a few emails, and it's going to happen, right? There are going to be some entrepreneurs that choose that path or just don't know, about exploration. They don't know. And that's fine. We take it on and we keep everyone posted that we're on it. I would say, you don't need to fear that you're cold calling us. Like, I take any like innovation is so exciting to me. I don't care if I know that person or not. It doesn't get special kind of like special care just because I know a person. So feel free. I mean, if there is a BD person, and now you know at least 2, you can email them directly. It's okay. Just make sure you didn't make it to spam. If you don't hear back, then again, make sure it didn't make it a spam. That's the only reason why I wouldn't answer back. Even just saying, I confirm receipt, give me some time. And I would usually say it would take me about, X weeks to get back to you. And I really think that it's okay not to find a person who knows the person who knows the person in order to reach.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's a small community. I mean, medical devices is really a small community, so you can always find a person like that. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. I'm just saying it's not very necessary. Now that I think of it, it might be helpful to target the right person. That's all.
Yeah.
Does it help to have an internal champion? So on the technical side or in any other kind of facet of the organization, or going straight to the BD team is always the best place to start?
I will answer by saying that the way that we are structured by design, I am removed from the R&D. Whoever looks at external innovation, it does not talk to the internal R&D projects. I talk to them, but I don't share with them any information, and vice versa. I am not deeply involved in what happens at R&D. I know all the public information. I may know one level down, but not more than that. And so I would actually say don't come through R&D to me. I'd rather be it very direct.
Yeah, I think to build on what Edna is saying is that our R&D teams need to be able to do their job in a very clean, untainted fashion and not be receiving ideas from the outside. And they, generally speaking, should know that. They should know that. And if you Brian in my R&D organization, you ping him, that's fine. But I would ask, for your sake and ours, don't ever start off sharing confidential information until we've agreed that that's the right next step. It should be non-confidential. And on that basis, if Brian's the only guy in J&J, then that's the right place to start. He'll make his way to me. But I think the first thing is reach out to the Tanya's of the world if you know them. If you don't, I would also be clear when you put your request. So let's just say you go to Brian and R&D, say, Brian, I need to find your BD group. Help them understand, because maybe they don't know. And that will definitely help them know how to shepherd things forward. A number of times we get stuff, people get it marked confidential and then busy, getting everybody to delete it out of their system because we haven't agreed that we want to receive confidential information. So I guess when you approach the Ednas or the Tanyas of the world, start off with a high level, non-confidential description of what it is that you are coming to us about, because a few things. If you come to me and say, Tanya, I've got a really cool stent idea, and this doesn't fit in my business or Edna's at this time, I'm going to say, no, that's not a strategic fit for us. I'm really glad you reached out to us, but I would highly recommend you call Boston Scientific or Medtronic, because that's right in their wheelhouse. And, I'm sure I'll get a big debate about why we should look at this. That's fine. But like, we're trying to save you time too by whether or not we're going to get very far here. So I think, ask to be put in touch with BD, I think would probably really help accelerate what you're trying to accomplish and make it much clearer about, trying to make a case to Joaquin Duato that he should buy his company is like, it's not that it falls on deaf ears, but the man's got plenty of other things to consider, and he has these teams for that purpose. So yeah, whoever you reach out to, ask them to put you in touch with BD, and then make sure it's non-confidential, and then we'll synthesize and figure it out from there. And I bet you Edna does it too, but in J&J's world, if it's not in my wheelhouse, I know how to find it where I know how to get it to where it needs to go. So bear with us.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's great context for the companies, not only to know how to contact you, but the approach in which to use to engage you in regards to that. I think it touches on another point, regarding some startups are and Edna mentioned this, a little leery in the beginning of engaging with a strategic. What happens to my IP? I'm a bit worried if I tell you, what I'm doing, even in general, I may lose, my advantage or kind of the uniqueness of my technology. Since you're such a Goliath, you're just going to take it and run with it. And I, from my experience, I know that's not happened. But Tanya, go ahead.
One is, I don't think as Goliath, it's our intention at all to steal any of your ideas ever, literally ever. I know, if you're going to go to a disreputable company, that's one thing. But set aside. Second, get your ideas patented, because you haven't gotten them patented. I don't want to talk to you either, right? Honest to God, do your job. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to have a business, you want to save Tanya's life down the road, that's fine. I love it. But do your job as an entrepreneur. Make sure you get your ideas patent protected. You shouldn't be talking to anybody until you've got that covered, because that's the thing that covers you and protects you, that you've got the protection, and we know it's your innovation. So I won't talk to you if you don't have it patented, by the way.
Perfect. Edna?
No, if you don't come talk to me before you have a provisional patent. And I'll add to that, you don't have to share what you don't want to share. It's totally legit to say, I don't feel comfortable sharing this at this time, and we absolutely respect that. What I don't respect is people sending me their deck and then adding a note, this is strictly confidential, please do not share it, and be like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I flip it back, and like you said, I have to delete it. So yeah. But yeah, so the point is, I mean, IP, at least a provisional patent. And before you have that, that's the first thing I check, by the way, especially with physicians. For some reason, they are
the physicians love to send their stuff. And by the way, everybody, you're getting the benefit of an attorney too. Like, you're not just getting like the best of the best, but you get an attorney in this whole equation. Take notes, please listen.
Again, the life I left behind. But yeah, once an attorney, always an attorney. I heard that too. No, but seriously, first of all, don't send us confidential information before we even met. Don't send us confidential information in general. It takes a long time before we decide to sign an NDA with the startup. So a lot of the initial conversations will be non-confidential. And again, that's fine. And what you don't feel comfortable sharing, don't.
Yep. Nice. Perfect. Yeah, the IP thing, it's pretty, rudimentary, basic, stepping stone for, incorporate, file your IP. But yeah, I think that's a great insight into kind of how to approach you. And again, covering the innovation, if they're not confident enough to have a non-confidential conversation with you about what it is, and feel like until they disclose confidential information, you won't get it, then they're not describing it well enough. That's kind of the
is that people come to us and really want to talk to us something confidential, but then I'll find some young kid on my team like, oh yeah, they've got that posted on YouTube. Well, you've blown confidentiality there, folks. Let me just tell you. So just FYI.
Yeah, or they publish the paper or did a talk at a conference.
Yeah. Or a surgeon speaks at a conference and talks to everybody, or So okay,
yeah,
stop.
Exactly. So speaking about kind of, we touched on engaging, but what do the engagements look like for you? What types of relationships and structures have you explored? Collaboration, co-development, licensing. Tanya, you mentioned the acquisitions. So maybe Edna, let's start with you on the types of engagements or relationships that you are exploring, and has that changed over time? Is there an increase? Is there one that you're more amenable towards at your organization at Edwards?
I think it's a case by case type of situation. Every situation really requires its own deal. I think we look at all stages of maturity. So we sometimes just look at the IP, and then we can look at, at preclinical results to evaluate, and all the way to first in human pivotal and all that. We do licensing, we do structured deals, like we do really everything. And that's why it's hard for me to answer. I mean, I've participated in several deals and I've seen a few, but I probably haven't seen, what the entire world has to offer in terms of deal structuring. So I don't know if this is kind of like where you allude to, but, talk to us early. If there's interest, I'm sure we'll find that deal. I don't know that there's like a template recipe for a company stage deal.
Mm-hmm. Tanya?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the fun of the job is finding the magic of the right construct that works for all parties. So, I've got some colleagues and they're talking about some acquisition deals and stuff, and sometimes those are just like they give you indigestion. I've actually had the good fortune of doing a lot of partnerships, and they tend to be flat out friggin' awesome fun, because you really are transforming the business, and you're finding someone who's a really, generally speaking, a market leader to help, to figure out, leaning on what they're really good at and what we're really good at, and bring those together. So somehow that seems to be my magic sweet spot of stuff. But I've done divestitures; those are not fun. I've done acquisitions, distributions, licenses, co-development. I don't even know what else I'm forgetting. We have a venture arm, so we invest. That's a separate group. So there's a lot of options out there. You do need to understand what you want to do. If you have, a portfolio of products, we may only be interested in one product, so maybe it's a license, or we want to distribute first. If you build your company around one product at a time, makes it easier for us to acquire the company versus all the other assets. So, yeah, I will tell you, I don't think the pharma world has as much fun as we do in med device, because med device, look, Ed is laughing, but pharma tends to license the compound at a certain stage of development, and then they pick it up and run with it. It's a model, works, keep going, Jansen, like the rocket. But in BD, in med devices, we look at so many different things. So I might be looking at a finished product to license or buy, or I might be looking for actually an unusual component that distinguishes my intellectual property in my widget, whatever that widget is, and I want that thing. Like, it's so final product to early stage. It's just such a wide array of. So I've only acquired one deal, 25 years. Now we've acquired a lot of deals, but what my businesses have needed have not been acquisitions, which have a lot of glamour to them. They're a pain in the ass, but nonetheless, I find all the other deals we do tend to be the more beneficial ones to both parties, just because of, I guess, maybe where I've been working. But anyway, I would say my other part of my job is digital, and digital, man, we can't move as fast as the market does. So we will probably lean more towards partnerships than trying to ingest them and try to keep up with the young kids. I kid you not, like literally, because we're busy competing with youngsters out there making stuff that's probably not medically device compliant. But anyway, my point is, speed in digital is really paramount, and we'll do more partnerships in the future than we will acquiring, generally speaking.
Young whippersnappers.
Young whippersnappers. I know that the whole audience is probably young whippersnappers, and they're like, who is this old? Anyway.
Or they probably don't feel like it once they start their company. They feel like they need a retirement home after the. I mean, Edna maybe knows from her first one. You went back, so you're real committed to doing startups after doing the first one. But again, I think that context is really valuable in understanding the types of structures, because sometimes I feel like companies want to approach with, this is the deal we want, or this is what we're asking for, or articulating kind of the ask in advance to help align expectations maybe. And that may be presumptuous for some of the companies, because they know that could maybe be pigeonholing as, we want X amount of investment. What's the deal? And maybe not framing the opportunity.
Here,
and is that better to start with the opportunity
this
first?
Is like dating. Everybody laughs about my analogy, but Brian's heard it before. Deals are dating. And it's about figuring out, first of all, do you even think you want to have something more than coffee with that person, and how it progresses. And I will also say, you know, the parties who are out there and have pretty clear idea what they want, if the other side aligns to it, you'll find people moving quickly. But if you don't, it's kind of like when you don't get the call back, you know, something wasn't quite exactly right relative to your vision and ours. And I'm not saying we'll like stop talking to you. It's not like that bad at dating scene, but I'm just saying you'll find that things will come back, and you're gonna have to, you really need to learn to read the T signals of what's coming back to you, because there's a reason why Edna and I are not frothing at the mouth to buy you, but we're proposing something else, or our numbers are much lower. There's a reason, right? We see something differently than what you do. We see value, but it's not going to be the same way. And you'll have to make that decision. Do you keep pushing for that? You know, you may have to just go raise more money versus having that immediate exit. So, yeah.
I like the dating analogy. Edna, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I should say the way that, again, we're structured is I do more of the diligence, and then I hand in hand, we go with corp dev and they actually do the deal making. I'm sure there's a lot more kind of like hand pulling in the corp dev than I get to see. I hear kind of like the little bit in the background, and I know when the deals are closed. But I can say, like, from my previous experiences, both in startups and at the incubator, you know, come open, okay? Sometimes not what you imagine is what really is the best. It is the best for you, but it doesn't have to be the best for you. It's a win-win situation. It has to be good for everyone, and that's why you need to come open. And I have to say, I mean, digital is very fast-paced. We're more on the traditional devices, so we have the time and we take the time.
Yeah,
So
well, I've got both, right? But the other thing I wanted to say, and I can't speak for Edwards, but I will say J&J definitely has found it beneficial to let you as the entrepreneur take on more of the risk of bringing things along the development path. But that's the reward for you, is you will get more, and we're letting you bear that risk versus us.
Right.
Namely because we think you're probably going to be better and more efficient than we are if we try to onboard you early. So your aspiration may be to get to like a preclinical stage and expect us to acquire it. We're probably not, like, we're probably to structure a deal where we get you to keep pushing things forward before we decide to take you out, just because we've learned that's a better, tends to be a better model.
Right.
And is that something you would echo at Edwards?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think in general, you see the industry going, you know,
Yeah, the industry is going that way. Yeah.
The industry is going that way. With someone else, like you said, we're going to stifle your innovation and your pace, and you know your product. Go ahead and do it. We'll support you. The acquisition will wait.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's an oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I just said if you go back 20 years, I know it's too young to know the stuff, but 20 years ago in the 510K world, that was the model. You get CE mark, and then you buy it, and then you try to commercialize it in the US. And we just learned that didn't really work very well, especially as things became more PMA and more clinically and more robust. That model didn't work. We ended up picking up stuff and then having to like re-engineer it. We're better off helping you get to that better final deliverable more times than not. Not always, but that's generally where the J&J brain sits.
And you kind of were alluding to another kind of line of discussion that I was thinking about, as far as kind of the value of a strategic relationship. So Edna, you mentioned earlier about engaging early, right? It's not a bad thing to engage early, but you're talking about a deal structure, you know, maybe formalizing a deal once you have additional validation or some, you know, a clinical validation to support a deal structure. But in general, from your perspective, what value does it add? Is there a relationship that maybe an investor would say, oh, they spoke to J&J, they got some guidance from them. We still need to raise money to get to clinical, but J&J is supporting this, or, you know, Edwards is supporting this innovation or commented on that. Does that add value to, you know, when they engage investors? Does it help at all to maybe start a relationship with a strategic to validate some assumptions? And then does that lead to maybe de-risking on the investor side? Does it give them some traction?
So on the investor, like, does that help them raise more money? There was once and this could be also a cultural issue, how Israelis are, we're very direct and blunt. And when an Israeli gets an email that this is an interesting technology from like a corporate America, they think, oh, this happened to me. Someone showed me a mail from like a big corporate saying, you see, they really want to buy me. They said that it's very interesting. And I read it and I translate it into like, very interesting is nice, but it's not like they're going to acquire. Yeah. I don't know that I mean, for sure it will help with investors if there is relationship between the VC that's interested and the corporate. But I wouldn't count on that. I think the early engagement is important to build that relationship and the trust. Because if there is, a future investment or even more than that, I mean, at the end of the day, the deals are between people.
Right.
And you have to have faith in the person and the team surrounding the person and in the company, just as much as you have in the technology. So that's why I think it's important to engage early, make yourself visible. I think we provide the questions that we ask, exploration specifically. We own the relationship with the startup, so we're there. People send me WhatsApp messages and call me and ask for advice and ask what these things happen. There is a lot going on even when we don't invest. So I actually think there's a big benefit of having that conversation. I would say they have that conversation with strategics and keep it warm. Don't go off the radar.
And Tanya, what?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think first and foremost in the medical device industry, and definitely for Edna and the cardiovascular, because that was my roots too. A lot of times the things that get the investors excited tend to be KOL support. Now, careful there, right? Careful, because that may mean that KOL is taking some of your equity and being, serving as an investor too. But, in the old days, Marty Leon, if he had a lot of interest in your company, that signal was a very powerful one to venture capitalists. So there's different ways of signaling interest to venture capitalists. We have something we're going to invest in very soon. I'm very excited about it. And I know that's going to help that startup actually onboard other investors. We're going to make a declaration. We're going to standardize on this technology for certain purposes. And I know that's going to help. I know that's going to help them, right? That helps us too, to give them a stronger support and infrastructure. But so it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, but just at this point, showing that Tanya said, "Oh, that's really nice to hear from you. Congratulations." Not mean we're getting married or even that we're going to date at all. And so
I mean, again, I think that's the interesting point, though, is kind of that superficial, interesting technology, not right for us right now. That's not going to get you traction with an investor, but maybe there's conversations between, the strategic to help them identify what the de-risking strategy would be, what type of validation data they maybe should be collecting. That helps kind of validate their strategy, right? So it's not just a isolated component, or is that not?
If first of all, if it's not on strategy and it's on interest, we're not going to waste your time, I guess is the thing, right? Like, how many times do you want to go on a date when it's not going to go anywhere? So that's part one. And I think we're pretty upfront in explaining it's not anything personal. It's just that it's not a strategic fit. Now, if it is a strategic fit and we're comparing, a pink stent to a purple stent to a blue stent, then we're looking at different things around those features and benefits that will make us pick and choose which one. Then if there's kind of like this crazy, fight in the market about these new innovations, then, we'll have to be more direct and explain that we're not going to move forward, even though it is of strategic interest. But when you get to the next level, we're going to be cautious about how much feedback we're giving you, because, I might be enabling my arch competitor to acquire the pink stent that I've coached you on. So, and we're only going to be so kind.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful to get that context. Edna, would you echo what Tanya was saying?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're careful with what we share, but I think in the early stages, and again, I talk mostly to startups at an early stage. Their knowledge of the American market is usually not as good as we have. We have people in the market and we know kind of like behavior. So a lot of that is, I think, could be helpful. A lot of the times they'll ask us, is this clinical study, what do you think? This is where I'm going. And we never say anything definitive. By the way, there's usually no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
But we can provide our opinion if you're interested in it.
Yeah, again, from investors that we spoke to, just developing those relationships at an early stage, getting some insight if they can to validate that strategy helps de-risk it, because the investors aren't always the most knowledgeable about what it's going to take to get the product to market or get it in the hands of a strategic, or position it for a strategic. And so getting some of that preliminary insight, they feel like that may add value.
So for us, we don't really do much investing in the Series A stage. Some, and but I will say this: when you have all just financial investors, you're not going to get that wisdom. So it is absolutely to your benefit to get a strategic on board to help you, right? Because you could really go down the wrong path. Now, there's only so much help we're going to give you, but there definitely can be good nuggets that help you that are really. It's important probably to listen and make sure you're digesting it.
So I kind of want to continue the line of thought that Edna was mentioning, is there's not really like a good or a bad way. But I know there are some maybe you shouldn't do ways of engaging. Maybe some areas that are examples that you've had. Tanya, you mentioned kind of, blasting the whole J&J organization is a non-starter, right? That's probably an move. So again, there's
conversation. I just couldn't believe I spent my entire day fielding emails from around the world. And so, it's just being thoughtful, right? It's just being mature.
And you could have spent that time responding to their email instead of trying to triage, the 60 other people that were coming.
I kind of wanted that time back. Yeah.
Which is totally reasonable. As far as kind of like other opportunities or other kind of experiences that you had, are there any examples of companies, or potential relationships that kind of immediate fell apart because of something that you would say, don't do this ever? Because I think, again, there's a lot of ways to do things good. There's a lot of ways to do things okay. There's only a few ways to do things where there's no coming back from. And so I guess kind of, are there areas that maybe companies should be aware of for engaging either of your organizations that maybe they should think about as far as kind of, don't start with this, or don't position it this way, or kind of in general, non-starters?
I think at the end of the day, even like a date, it's a first impression type of type of engagement. And I think I don't know if it's style or attitude, but watch your behavior. Like when we talk, make sure that you're at your best, you have patience. And what often happens is that people talk with confidence about things that we know more than they do, and sometimes they're wrong. And all I would say is just listen and have your emotional intelligence radars on, because if we start somewhat having a conversation around a certain point and we're trying to tell you that not really, you should probably listen instead of argue. But that's argue is kind of like taking it to a extreme, but really try to sense the meeting. I know it's harder when we're now in Zoom and stuff like that, but we still have sometimes meetings face to face. Try to feel the room and try to make sure that you kind of like you're answering the questions, you're not being too defensive, or you're not talking about things that you don't necessarily know. And like I said, it's always okay to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'll check, I'll get back to you, and all of those.
Yeah, I love, Tanya, you set the tone for dating. Now we're going to have to keep that going through the whole
process. I'm telling you, Brian, it's always a theme, but it's true, because there's humor in this, but you're building, the thing you want to be able to do is build a relationship, and you want Edna and Tanya to want to talk to you again, because, the companies where I'm like, yeah, okay, I might want to help them, or I think there's, more importantly for me, my time's going to be spent on strategic fit. But through MedTech Innovator, I can't even remember, Brian, but I think it was last year somewhere, there was a company that had a product directed towards autistic children, and their absolute passion and desire to really make a difference in these children's lives was just so, it resonated with me. And while I didn't know a damn thing about it, I really want to take them under my wing and help them, at least see if I can get them some advice within J&J. So just know, when you can make that connection, that personal connection, it can pay off just by the virtue that Edna and I are willing to take more of our time, because our days are limited, just like yours, and we've got to prioritize where we're going to spend them. So when you build that connection, that bridge, that's a win for you. don't abuse it. Don't abuse it. That's the other thing.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that we echo to our companies, is really trying to instill the passion about what it is, get them to be a champion first and not a customer or an investor into what you're doing, but get them to be a champion, an advocate for you. And that leads to those bigger relationships, or at least a next discussion.
So another company we mentored a few years ago really, I think they saw MedTech Innovator as a way in the door to sell their product and get us to want to buy it and incorporate it into our products. And they really had the opportunity to get a lot of great wisdom from a lot of people, and they really didn't want to take it at all. They kept pushing the envelope of not being mentored, but why don't you want to put this thing in your product? It'll help. And the fact of the matter is, they weren't the only ones with that widget. There were others. We'd already gone down a path with others, and they just weren't listening. So, because if your passion is so strong you can't hear, you're gonna realize that pretty quickly. It definitely can be a watch out for sometimes entrepreneurs and startups.
Got it. Yeah, too passionate is also a bad thing. It's too much of anything is always a bad thing, right? But to that point about really about the passion component, one of the things that I was wondering, as far as the types of engagements and types of kind of interactions that you've had on aligning kind of the value for the company's product to what your portfolio is. So Tanya, you were saying this widget will fit into your existing pipeline. Do you prefer when companies come to you in general with how this would work strategically, with that already kind of baked out? So it's so you don't have to connect so many dots, I would say. Is that no?
Because what I find is I have people trying to tell me why this should be part of the strategy when I know it isn't. So no, focus on what you think is the value benefit to the patient, to the surgeon, to the end users, and focus on that. What the size of the market opportunity is. I will say some market opportunity sizes just won't even cross the threshold relative to the investment and size for us. Focus on knowing your business and your products or your technology. Don't worry about trying to tell me what my strategy should be.
Edna?
I think to get my attention, focus on the unmet needs, because in my brain and in my list, I know what the unmet needs of the organization are. And if I see that that unmet need really well, then I will want to hear about that solution, because you have the problem right. So I would say, don't think about the strategic, don't go that far. Just focus on the unmet need. I'll know how to connect the dots and see if there's interest here or not.
And so on the strategic need, how do companies know exactly where maybe some of those strategic areas of interest are for either of your organizations? I think, we talked briefly, Edna, about this during the prep call, is not everything's always on the surface, right? Not everything's on the website. There's new things coming down the pipe, and that might be an opportunity for a company that doesn't want to be in a competitive landscape, or has kind of a new innovation that may align with something that you're looking at but not publishing. How do they get that insight? Is there a conduit through just a conversation? Would you disclose that, or talking to other people at the organization? How do they maybe get beyond the surface? How do they get some additional insight, if there is any, on the strategic interest side?
It's true that some of the things that I look for are not public information. Having said that, let's start with the public information.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot out there, and it's very rare that I see that some of the entrepreneurs really kind of peruse the website, saw our investor day, went, to whatever conferences and stuff like that. So let's start with the basics. And you know what? I think that would be enough. First of all, word gets around. You kind of look at the companies that we look at, we talk with at conferences. I think conferences are a very good place to kind of get a feel of what companies are looking for. And again, if you have an unmet need, then that's, again, you don't have to be exactly kind of like a fit, but you need to be able to talk about your unmet need. So I would say, yes, I agree. It's a challenge because we don't necessarily make it public, but I think, whatever is public out there is a good start.
Yeah. So here's the thing I think makes it difficult in trying to figure out what you would want to talk to J&J about versus Edna. If you say, I've got a really great orthopedic new knee thing and I'm going to call Edna up, I would say, you have not spent time understanding the core of Edwards' business. If you call me up and say, Tanya, I've got this really awesome new knee solution, I'm making this up, I'd say, okay, you understand that we do have an orthopedics business. Now, if you're going to come to me and say you really need to get into diagnostics around urinary tract infections, I'm going to say, once again, you haven't spent any time on our business. We don't, generally speaking, we're not in diagnostics. we sold the diagnostics business a few years ago. Like, we're not in diagnostics today. So I think, to Edna's point, there's enough public information out there to get you at least, and don't waste your time too, to be honest. Now, I'll say, if you have, like, it's very funny, we get bankers who come to us and they're trying to sell everything out of the moon. Well, they promised their client they're going to reach out to they're going to have J&J, and they'll have all of us on the list from a banking process, because that's how they convince the company to let them lead that process. But for you and your time, take the time to do your diligence on where, your priorities. You can tier everybody, and use that.
So kind of jumping into some of the deal structure, and I know kind of you look on the diligence side, evaluating opportunities and getting them in the door, and getting them to the legal, your other hat, probably more so to negotiate some terms. But Tanya, on your side, can you maybe touch on some of the terms that you've seen? A lot of companies are always thinking it has to always be exclusive to a strategic. If a strategic is going to get involved, they want global rights. Is that something that you see as a standard, or is that something that you see as a case by case, and you're flexible on exploring those types of options?
Okay, well, I'm always going to kind of want the biggest and best of what I think it is. But on the other hand, as we're looking at the world today, China, we really have acknowledged it's just got a lot of unique elements to the China market, and we're going to need to think about, in some cases, China-specific solutions versus the global solutions. So, and so that may mean you come to me and say, oh, this is a really awesome solution for the world. And I'm going to let you say, well, I don't know that that's going to fit in China for a lot of different reasons. So I guess I think that's a new thing that's happening in the world today. It's case by case, everybody. I hate to break it to you, but it kind of comes down to what is the strategy and the business need. I may be having problems getting something into Europe now with the MDR regulation. So I might just say, you can help me get there better and faster than I can here. I do like the broader sweeping deals, because it's a little less like, whack-a-mole for every region in the world. But there's so much, I think, alignment around regulatory, generally speaking. And so that's a hard one to answer, Brian. It really comes down to the deal itself. But I just think,
put you on the hot spot.
No, but I do think understanding the regulatory differences between what's going on in Europe right now and China for sure has really created a very stringent, a very China first cultural country culture that is definitely influencing some of our thinking. Doesn't mean we won't go a global path with a deal, but we may have to think about it differently given those constructs and challenges.
And so I'm going to go into another question from the cohort here. But as far as engaging with the organization, they're giving a scenario of if they've already been engaged with BD, but they're being approached by other groups inside of your organization for kind of follow-up discussion and discussing other opportunities. Is there competing interests in, like for a J&J example, or even at Edwards? And then maybe mention, if you can comment on kind of a scenario where, the BD is in conversation, but that company is being approached also by other groups in your organization. Is that something that happens, or how would you deal with that if it does?
It doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't remember, even from my startup experience, and then in my two last roles, I don't remember that there were like multiple groups within one company talking. Edwards is not a big J&J, so it should be maybe if it's something that it's a company that has like a solution that can impact our current existing portfolio of R&D and not just a future product, then maybe it would happen, but it really shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
Yeah, so I definitely, listen, back to my story of the guys, wallpapering everybody. I definitely have had, so especially in digital, I'll see things really, I get it. You're trying to find a lot of touch points and hoping that one of them actually is success. But in the med tech side, we won't go far competing like a Depew and an Ethicon in this. We talk, we work together, we stick together. Our leadership is really like reviews. We won't go far down the path of like internally competing for something. That will not happen. So if you manage to make multiple touch points of interest, that's interesting that would get that far, but we'll consolidate very quickly as to who should be point on behalf of the interest for everybody, and factor in pulling the information. I think I'm seeing that digitally, right? So I have a digital focus in Ethicon, which is general surgery, but I now also have med tech wide, and we are trying to look at things that across all the franchises versus everybody having their own solution, right? Because some of these digital things, let's just pretend a dating app, right? If we all need a dating app, who needs Match? Who needs eHarmony? Who needs Bumblebee? I don't know what the hell they are now. Like, we don't all need our own unique dating apps. We can actually benefit from consolidating, having one. So that's where my hat's at. But if your dating app goes to Depew, they'll contact me and say, hey, this came to us. So we have a really good ecosystem of communicating so that we don't have that kind of internal competition. That will never happen. You will never find us bidding against one another. Not going to happen.
Would it be in the startup's best interest to disclose if they're in a conversation already with a different group in your organization before they? Yeah,
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Be transparent, right?
Try to be as transparent as you can. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the trying to date two ladies at the same time, two people at the same time, always ends up potentially being a problem.
Sisters in the same family, they will find it.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Guys, I know you think I'm crazy, but if you just take a moment to think about human dynamics, you go, she's got something to that. I should write a book.
I mean, it's working. It's sticking to every topic we're talking about right now. But yeah, I think, again, to your point, it's about being transparent, and also may help facilitate that relationship. Obviously, there's interest in multiple different aspects from an organization. Be transparent about that. I think it shows that you're a good steward and worth continuing conversation with. Again, if you're comparing, multiple options, the red, blue, and green ones, this one is honest, transparent, and a good steward, and they're going to maybe execute better than any of the other ones if everything else is comparative.
Yeah. And understand, we know what you're trying to do, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like your goal as an entrepreneur and reaching out to us. If you come to me and say, I really would love it if you invested in us, but we really plan on going direct to market on our own, that's your first strategy, I kind of don't believe you. I mean, I think that's, so it's okay. We understand why you're coming to us, and we expect it.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the other questions from our cohort was kind of around relationships with the company. So as if the company has, a board member or an advisor from a different organization, a different strategic, and they engage you, is that problematic? Does that create maybe some hesitancy in engaging with those companies? Are there any reservations if somebody had somebody on their board from BD and are reaching out to you about a relationship? Does that, Tanya, does that cause any reservations? Do you see any issues?
I listen, we all keep an eye on what each other's doing, for sure.
Edna, how about you?
Are you talking about like a board member that is in a current position in a different strategic, or past position? Because if it's past, of course it's okay. I mean, actually, it's good that you have experienced people on your board. If it's current, and that means they're there because they invested in the company, then it's something that we probably knew before because we know your cap table. So I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, sometimes I don't think you want like two direct competitors like really working on like in your company. That's just usually that doesn't happen, I think, right?
I'd say we don't necessarily, it's not our preferred, it's not our preference from an investing, right? We want to be, so in J&J speak, when we invest through JJDC, which is our venture arm, it's because you fit with our strategy and it's really a very clear mandate by JJDC. We anticipate onboarding you at some point in time. That could be its distribution for a while. It could be we acquire you at some point. Now, if I'm up against, Medtronic on this and we're both on there, okay, fine. It definitely creates a little bit of a discomfort. And also know this, that the venture capital arm at J&J is firewalled from me, right? They're a very distinct legal entity. We keep them separate to protect really your intellectual property and innovation from us. Not that we're doing the same thing, but just don't know where you'll end up down the road. You may end up with somebody else. So we will be cautious about that. We'll be cautious on how much we help you. You do need to have the right advisors beyond just strategics. But I would say, generally speaking, strategics would rather be the only strategic with a bunch of financial investors versus all of us coming to the party together. That doesn't always work out that way, but generally speaking, that would probably be our preference.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cap table piece is, I mean, it echoes with a lot of the companies is keep your cap table clean, and identifying kind of those partners that want to do more than just invest. And obviously, as a strategic,
it's okay to go to all of us, right? That's the other part. But I'm saying it's not just the cap table. We know you come to us, right? I would expect. But once you've got a strategic on board, it's not I think from a strategic perspective, we've invested in you, we made that bet, and it's our preference to really be the strategic, right? To working with you versus you dating all the cute boys. So let's think about that. And I get it, right? Like, let's make sure, and fundraising is getting tight, and you got to do what you got to do, but think about your options and really where you want to go.
Yeah. But I mean, as you were saying, once you've invested in a company, you want to be their partner. You want to help them, right? You don't want to see them flounder and sink. So
I think Edward does the same thing. When we put money in from an equity investment, we're in it with you in the long haul.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, again, something to think about, not necessarily having to shop around. But I know we got a couple minutes left. I wanted to really kind of transition in maybe some future trends or trends that you're seeing in your ecosystem. And I know you kind of mentioned from deal structure or engagement, not necessarily deal structure, but engagement. You're hearing more from investors, and companies are coming to you earlier because the investment cycle is kind of moving downstream a little bit, or their purse strings maybe are getting a little tighter as we start to see a potential recession. So more companies are coming to you. Is that, do you think that's going to persist for the upcoming period of time? Or I guess what are your thoughts on kind of the future, maybe the next year, 2 years outlook on how engagement is going to look for you?
I was already working in 2000, and then in 2008 and 9. I've seen the ups and the downs, and this is looking like it's going down. Okay, I don't know. Who knows? In Hebrew, there's a saying that you shouldn't try to even predict the future. All I'm saying is, like, in the past few months, I think I'm hearing it a little bit more from startups. And yes, and I think it's because VCs are just trying to hold on to their money, and they're not investing as lightly not as lightly. I shouldn't say that. Like, before, it was easy to raise, right? But I think it's now becoming more difficult, and startups are looking at other ways of funding their companies. And again, it's totally legit to approach us. There is the perception that we invest only in very late stages. And I agree, most of our investments would be after first in human. That probably would be our preference. So it's A and B. But I would say, we're open to listening at any stage. So that's maybe why I'm feeling that people are calling me at an earlier stage.
And Tanya, I guess what's your take? Yeah, this does feel a little bit like the early 2000s all over again. So I'm with Edna. I think we all feel it from an economy everywhere. But I do think there's been some good successes in med tech, which is why there's been a flood of money coming back into it. And that's a really good thing. So, focus on your job, focus on what you want to bring, focus on the unmet need that Edna talked about is really critical. And, you just may have to ring more doorbells. It's honestly maybe what you're going to do from a fundraising. And, I wouldn't mortgage your entire life away, but just know that you need some skin in the game, and maintain your conviction, and keep knocking on the doors.
Yeah, and use your network. Keep the dating app open.
Keep the dating app open.
The dating app open.
So any closing remarks before we wrap everything up? Tanya, I'll start with you since you finished.
No, thank you. Edna, it's lovely doing this with you. Brian, as always, to you and the team. This is fun. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy speaking to the startups. So I look forward to hearing from anybody that thinks they've got something I should be connecting with you about.
And Edna, any last thoughts to leave with?
The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much. It was really fun to be here and listen to the answers too. And to all those entrepreneurs that are listening to us, like Tanya said, it's great hearing those. Those are kind of like the moments where I say, oh, I love my job, like listening
Yeah.
to all the brilliant ideas. So keep working on them, keep coming. It may be, you know, a steeper hill, but you can make it.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well,